Hello, everyone. I'm Seth Stewart of the Miami University Alumni Association, and thank you for joining us today for this panel sponsored by the Alumni Association and our campus partners. Today's discussion will center on the topic of race and the workplace. And thanks to those who of you have submitted questions ahead of time, and we also want your participation live. So feel free to ask questions using the Ask Question button below the video. We'll try to answer as many as we can. So now I would like to introduce our panel and our moderator for today's discussion. Erica J. Bolden is the head of diversity, inclusion, and corporate social responsibility at Mercedes-Benz USA. We have LaDavia Drain is the head of global inclusion, diversity, and equity for Amazon Web Services. And our moderator will be Michelle Thomas, and she serves as the director of student organizations and diversity within the Farmer School of Business at Miami. And Michelle, thank you again for joining us as the moderator for this panel, and I will turn over to you to start.
My pleasure, Seth. Boy, am I excited for this one. I've been reading the backgrounds and the bios of our two exciting panelists. So let's kick off. I know that our audience wants to hear questions and hear your wisdom. So let's start off. Each of you can take this question. So what is your current role and how did you get to your current position? Erica, you want to take it first and then we'll field it over to LaDavia.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Excited to be here. It's really interesting just the way I started out. So going back to my Miami days, I actually started out as a zoology major. And I'm not sure if the course is still there, was BMZ, famous course, botany, microbiology, and zoology. That was great. Then I met this thing called inorganic chemistry and I said, you know what? I think I need to rethink this. And so I actually pivoted. I changed directions there and I ended up, I graduated with a dual degree in both speech communications and in Spanish. And I had my senior capstone project actually while I was finishing my last semester. I had an internship with a management consulting firm. And this was a firm that was based in Cincinnati. It's since been acquired. It's actually a part of Korn Ferry Consulting now. But when I started there, I said, you know what, this diversity thing, this seems pretty interesting. D&I was always a passion of mine. I actually stayed in McBride Hall because it was a diversity dorm. So even though I didn't think that was going to be embedded in my career, it's just interesting to see, by happenstance, how you change directions and you figure out how to leverage your passion into your career. So started out in consulting and this is where you had a lot of chief diversity officers popping up for the first time, a lot of corporations leveraging consultants to come in, make a strategy and think about what is this diversity stuff? How do we train around it? So did that for several years. And then I ended up joining a professional services firm and it was in a marketing and sales capacity. However, shortly thereafter, when joining PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, I realized that D&I was still my passion. And so I wiggled my way back into the National Office of Diversity. And I stayed at PwC for about 10 years. And when I left, I was managing firm-wide all of the programs for the firm and looking at those critical intervention strategies, those talent development, talent management programs to develop our diverse staff there. Then I ended up leaving, going to a law firm. I was director of diversity. And now I am at Mercedes-Benz USA in the greater Atlanta area, and I oversee both diversity and inclusion as well as corporate social responsibility or the community focus. So it's really just been leveraging my passion, working my way through, irrespective of the industry or the organization, you still see a lot of the same challenges and opportunities present themselves. So just really being agile and working with the evolution of D&I.
Thank you for that important work, Erica, that you're doing. And again, I read up on your LinkedIn profile, incredible pedigree of work and body of work. So we thank you for that. LaDavia, could you share a little bit about your current role and how did you get to your current position?
Absolutely. And Michelle, thanks so much for having me. Erica, it's an honor to share the stage with you and to see you again after all of these years. But my journey, it's just like Erica, it started at Miami. And I remember there was the I Am Miami campaign. And I remember challenging the I Am Miami campaign. And I remember meeting with Dr. Crutcher, who was our provost back then, and just and asking, is this really who we are as Miami? Are we recruiting students and making them think that Miami looks different than it actually is? It was a campaign with for the most part, African-American students on the front, as if, we had a large amount of African-American students on campus. And I just believed it wasn't necessarily genuinely saying who we were. And so that started, I believe, my quest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Fast forward, went to law school, and then after law school, practiced law for a short amount of time, but got antsy, decided I needed to really get into government and into politics to do the work that I really wanted to do for communities. And so joined my hometown member of Congress, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge on Capitol Hill, first as her legislative counsel and then legislative director, worked my way up to become the executive director for the Congressional Black Caucus. And I would say it was really there that I really found my voice in this area. And just sitting at the feet of just incredible people, being able to hear their stories and all the things that they've overcome to become the people that they were. And I just felt the responsibility, right, to continue on this path of making sure that I could be in a place to make life better for people who look like me, people from marginalized communities and underserved communities. So after being executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus, fast forward a little bit, joined Hillary Clinton's campaign a few years later as her National African American Outreach Director, traveled with her, met people all over the country who I, of course, still have relationships with today, but still the same work, making sure that people who look like me and people from marginalized communities actually have a voice and a say in our government and who would be our national representatives. And then from there, went back to the Hill as a chief of staff for a New York member, and then came to Amazon. Started in policy as a lobbyist for the company, primarily building up our diversity, equity, and inclusion work in public policy, and decided that I wanted to go over into the tech side of the house to do this work. Went over to Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud computing company, and it's been history since. I've only been with AWS now for about 6 months. I'm losing track of time, but I know that it was the right decision. We have an incredible CEO that's really committed to the work. And so now I'm here, trying my best to bring about systemic change.
I love how each of you had found your calling in DE&I, but did it in different ways. LaDavia, you in terms of the political scene and Hillary Clinton's campaign and Congress and the Black Caucus, just a great. And then, of course, Erica with her success on the corporate side of the ladder. So that takes us to the next question. We look at the companies that you're both in. What are the best practices in corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why don't we start with Erica for that one?
Yeah, the amounts of grit and resilience that this requires, I'd say those levels are immeasurable, and really just having that stick-to-itiveness, right? So thinking back when I started in this field as an intern, the same white papers, research, all of that, even though it'd be, oh goodness, almost 20 years ago, still very, very relevant even now. And so, being staying ahead of the curve. And so a lot of these things, what you're seeing now, especially now this year of tumultuous, events that have been taking place, diversity, equity, inclusion, these have always been urgent topics. They certainly are not new. However, you're seeing a heightened sense of awareness and urgency to address these. And a lot of companies, they are now, you're seeing they're either doubling down and amplifying their efforts, or you have companies where they're just now coming into this moment of awakening and this is something new for them. And so they're creating the function, they are paying attention to it. So really, when you're in this industry, ensuring that you're just staying on course, you staying to your strategy. Of course, a lot of agility and flexibility are required. But I would say, it's the same strategy that was there on the board, before all of these events happened, pretty much the same thing. We're seeing pivots to address, so again, with the heightened level of urgency when you're thinking about issues like social justice, but so that it's not viewed as a knee-jerk reaction, you're staying the course. So this is always viewed as something that you're just staying the course, you're being proactive. The network, You'll find there's a very small world in this space. A lot of the practitioners know each other, consultants, trainers in that space. So it's a network. And I would say it's really important to ensure that you have the right level of infrastructure and support to actually effectuate change. You also see in this space where it can be some window dressing, what I like to call smoke and mirrors, right? So it's working your way through that and identifying that level of support that you need and the ability to really impact change. There was a great paper in I believe it was the Wall Street Journal not too long ago, and it was talking about just the level of turnover in this space with chief diversity officers and why that is. And it is because you so often find that there is not adequate support, the infrastructure, lack of appropriate budget, appropriate resources. So really, when something like this is your passion, really taking that on as your life work. And that is really what contributes, at least to my level of resiliency in this field, because I do feel it is my life work. It is my passion. And I don't view it being tied to a certain corporation. It's my contribution to society. So really taking a look back to see, why is it that I would want to do this kind of work, and then being able to get back up and do it again.
I love what you said about window dressing. I took note of that. And that's exactly right. I think we're all challenging the places and the spaces in which we work to make sure that, they're talking and putting out the rhetoric and statements, right, about diversity and how important it is. But yet when you look at their boards of directors, they're white men. And so are we really walking the talk and making sure that we're not just putting out empty rhetoric? So Ladavia, can you give us your take on best practices in corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely. You hit on it, Michelle. You talked a little bit about board diversity. I mean, it is imperative that the people that are making decisions at these companies are diverse. And you see, we have a vision from the top that it trickles down into the company and into the company's culture. And so companies that have, more diverse boards, that have diverse C-suites, that have diversity in management, tend to see bigger strides, right? Not incremental change, but change from the top down. And I think that that's important. Also, you have affinity groups, which are important. I mean, folks need to be able to engage and find community inside of companies. And I do believe that affinity groups do offer that. In Amazon, we have 12 affinity groups, global, and really making a positive impact within the company. I'd also just talk a little bit about it. We're a very innovative company, one of the most innovative companies in the world. And that innovation shouldn't stop when diversity, equity, and inclusion starts. So we have to carry that same innovation. Basically, however we're making business decisions with that same rigor, we have to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And I do believe that while Amazon we have our work cut out for us, I do believe that if we just constantly continue to iterate and innovate and approach this work with the same rigor we approach any other business decision, I do believe that that's how we'll make strides. And I do believe that that is a best practice that we would share with other companies and other organizations trying to get at the same work.
Yeah, I so agree that, we are looking to make sure wherever we're working in the DE&I space that the company, the corporate culture is not treating DE&I as a side order. It really is the main entree. And we talk about that a lot at Miami, in particular, the role that I have, making sure that it is across all divisions, everything that we're trying to do, that we're speaking and amplifying full-throated messages. And also the students, obviously, when you were looking at companies, culture and fit mattered. And the students that I work with, they're looking for that. They're wanting to make sure about the affinity groups, to your point, Ladavia. Do they have vibrant, sustainable affinity groups? Are they really making sure that everybody has a seat at the table and has agency? That's important. And I think that's what a lot of students that I'm working with, they're looking for places that they can make an impact and a difference. So let's unpack our next question. What has changed this year? When we think about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter movement, what has changed this year in response to the protests following those movements and those tragic deaths? how do you see it? LaDavia, what is your take?
Yeah, so I do believe that we did hit an inflection point as an industry, and not just the tech industry, but just corporate in general. And I do believe that some there was a tipping point. Honestly, I can't tell you exactly what changed because for me, you know, George Floyd happened, but Trayvon happened. You know, Tamir Rice happened. Sandra Bland happened, and I can keep on going down the list. But something tipped over, and I will say I was proud to see how many companies not only put up the statement on Twitter and on Instagram about their commitment to the Black community, but then also put dollars behind that commitment and started to support organizations that are on the ground trying to get this work done. But I also, and we'll see if this is the case, as more is shared now that we're a few months, removed from the things that were happening in the spring and in the summer. But I do wonder, what is that going to mean internally, though? I know we made some pretty big commitments that recently became public, where we said, we're going to double our population of Black employees, right? It's just something we needed to do. We're going to go out and make, the right executive hires and have Black folks in executive seats more than we have in the past, and not just hiring, but also representation, making sure that we're hiring and we're retaining people who look like me, and then allowing them to come in and be their authentic self, having a culture of inclusion. And so those are, some of the things that I've seen change. But, again, the jury's still out, especially on corporate America. And I'm a part of corporate America, and I feel confident saying this. I do expect that not only will we see, kind of what's happened this year, but the hope is that it'll continue and it'll just become a part of our DNA, a part of our culture of who we are and how we're going to show up, and not just for the Black community, but for all different types of communities. I'm a global leader, so we're looking at in other parts of the world, people with disabilities and neurodiversity, and how companies are looking at invisible and visible diversity. So my hope is that it will be sustained, kind of the things, the issues that companies are now more woke about.
Yeah, we often wonder, we're in the spotlight when these things happen, and then time goes on and things fade. And how do we keep the relevancy, making sure that we continue to pound on that message and understand that there will be another George Floyd. There will be other instances, and we just can't allow for it to be in the moment type of vision. And we have to be able to continue to lift up that cause for all marginalized voices. And, Erica, how are things going, when you see the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd at Mercedes-Benz? How's that been handled there?
Yeah, and so it's interesting. So for the most part, my efforts are focused on North America. However, we're an international global company. Our parent company is based in Stuttgart, Germany. So it's Daimler AG. And of course, the narrative around diversity on a global scale, it differs, right? So of course, here in the US, that we're, for most people, would be hyper focused, right? Those protected classes, the things that you see a lot of lawsuits over, right? Race, age, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those things, right? In Europe, there's less of a focus, I would say, on race and ethnicity. Of course, you still have the same issues that are prevalent, but depending on where you are in the world is a little bit different. Germany, their focus is gender. That's, of course, my focus here in the States as well, in North America. However, my focus primarily would be on gender and looking at the intersectionalities of it, right? So the various, taking that and taking it scale down, right? Looking at the various other levels. So with respect to gender, ability, all of those different things, and just the different layers of oppression. So that's what we're tackling. And it really, it's trying to translate that over on a global scale and knowing what's important. But with, the height of everything with this pandemic, that was really interesting to see, of course, not a US thing. It's a global phenomenon, a global issue, right? In the beginning, when the pandemic was really becoming more of a focal point here in the US, the racial data for the COVID-19 was really sparse, and it began to become more complete as the effects increased in time went on, and the pattern was clear. Communities of color are being disproportionately impacted and hit quite hard by COVID-19. So we were beginning to see that, nationally, African-American deaths from COVID-19 were nearly 2 times greater than would be expected based on the share of the population. And then in some states, the rate was 3 times or more greater. Of course, Hispanics, Latinx, they make up a greater share of confirmed cases than their share of the population. In some states, it was 4 times as greater. So really, as time went on, we got more and more data, and we were looking at that, and it really became clear we need to address what's being done, the likelihood that minority communities are going to continue to be impacted by this. How do we make sure that we stay on course and stay focused on these disparities to help communities respond effectively and increase their safety? Being based in Atlanta, more or less the cradle of civil rights, it was very important for us to stay focused on that. So all of our employees' headquarters mapped to the Atlanta office have been working remotely since the month of March, and we will continue to do so for the unforeseeable future, at least until March 2021. But we opened our headquarters building, and we've been catering meals every week, so about 1,000 to 1,200 meals per week. And we gave some of our Sprinter vans on loan to various nonprofit organizations so they could increase their food delivery. We're doing that on a local scale. Making sure that we've always been there, but giving additional support to the Atlanta University Center, the consortium here in Atlanta. So that's Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, ensuring that they've got adequate scholarships to help them, and all of the nonprofit organizations. So that's from a CSR standpoint. The social equity, of course, making sure that we are positioned well. Making those efforts, although having, leaning into it in a space of vulnerability and empathy. We've not yet, I applaud you, LaDavia and Amazon, for really taking those bold steps to say, this is what we're doing to increase leadership. Germany, they've done that again, gender, right? I'm pushing to ensure that it happens from a racial and ethnic standpoint here in the US. But definitely there's social justice. If you own a Mercedes, I worked with the legal teams, the various entities. So the research and development group out in Sunnyvale, California, if you own a Mercedes, you can ask her, hey, Mercedes, do Black Lives Matter? She'll tell you. You ask her, do all lives matter? She'll say yes. And then she tells you about Black Lives Matter again. So, it's been interesting to see, especially with the customer base who aren't used to that kind of thing, and they kind of push back. But I am proud of the company for taking a stance. We were the only OEM or automotive company to actually come out, participating in things like Blackout Tuesday, to come out and to make a statement when all of this happened, coupling it with whether it be financial support of NAACP, legal funds, or what have you, making sure that we do have a foothold in the community. So, really, it's just encouraging folks that silence, it is being complicit, right? You have some folks, we now have been rolling out, mandatory training. And, so when you're thinking about anti-racism, what does that mean? Really diving into this concept of white supremacy, understanding that does not mean that you have to don a KKK hood. It's simply that you're complicit with these systems that are oppressive, these systematic policies, procedures, and now how do we dismantle those? So really pushing conversations that have never really happened before, getting our expats, we have a lot of expats, and getting them to understand that even if you are not a citizen of this company, you're not a guest of this, of this country. You're not a guest of this company. So you have to be immersed and involved in the conversation and identify what you can do to support and push us forward. It's been pretty tumultuous, with respect to politics as well. We've had some courageous conversations. We talked about managing politics in the workplace, and that actually went pretty well. People, of course, it's the third rail. You really are grown up to think that you avoid topics of race, religion, politics, especially at work. Now more than ever, you're seeing these lines have been blurred. What's happening in the outside world now intrudes at work, right? And especially what's important to note is that people of color We do not have that privilege. Disengaging from political conversations, topics, areas of interest that are deemed to be political, we don't have that luxury nor that privilege, right? So you cannot check that. And if you're really pushing that you are supposed to be authentic, you're bringing your best self to work, we have to acknowledge how all of these things impact these things that are happening. It should not be towing a political party divide. Boils down to human rights, right? So we really have been pushing that conversation, getting people to lean into this area of discomfort and understanding that everyone has the ability to be change agents. You might lose some people along the way. It certainly is a journey, right? But you just being able to clearly articulate what that journey looks like going forward. Don't have all the answers, but really coming to a consensus and creating this baseline, this meaningful understanding of what this means and where we're headed.
I think conversations and dialogue is so critical and so important. When all of those events unfolded at the university level, I think Miami did a very good job. I know in the Farmer School of Business, we really had those authentic conversations to unpack a lot of those things. And the fear factor where people, they're afraid to say anything because they're afraid that they'll get judged or they're saying the wrong thing. I would rather have people ask me, honestly, with an open heart, instead of walking around and being ignorant of the facts. We need people to be brave enough to ask those questions. But we also need to receive it in a way that we won't incriminate them and make them feel less than because they may not understand all the contours and the nuances. This is very difficult, what everyone is going through right now. So it's complex. And the silence is dangerous factor. John Lewis talked about that a lot. And, I thought about him a great deal as all these events were unfolding. I'm sure all of you did as well.
Michelle, I have to show you my shirt. So do you see it?
Oh,
Good trouble shirt. You
oh,
said something to it, so I brought them today. So I thought I'd, share that with you.
Love it.
I love it. And I'm going to ask you offline where you got it.
I'll send you one.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, the students now, because we're all, when I talk to my students, they're hungry for advice. They want to be able to hear from wonderful people like you who have a lot of lived experiences. Can you unpack what advice would you have to offer diverse students and even alumni who are participating on this call, how to navigate issues of race in their own careers and maybe even at the university as they're going about their day on academics and going to class? LaDavia, why don't you take that first?
Sure. I'll start. I used this word authentic earlier, and I'll just use it again because I think it's powerful. You are enough, and I'm just going to speak directly to students, right? You're enough. Exactly who you are authentically is enough. And you should feel comfortable taking your whole self into your classrooms, into your meetings, into your internships and your externships, and not feeling as though you have to wear a mask or change the tone of your voice or wear different clothing or not be truthful and honest about where you grew up. I remember being at Miami and the question always came, where are you from? And most people say Cleveland. And so, if you're from Cleveland, there's a lot of different parts of Cleveland where, well, I'm from the city. And I knew even back then to be very proud and say, no, I'm from Cleveland. What suburb? No suburb. I'm from the city, and luckily I had enough confidence to do that back then. Doesn't mean that I've always been that confident in spaces. But I would, though, encourage students to just be who you are and just recognize that is enough. Also, lift as you climb. I think that things have definitely gotten better, that folks do believe that they can bring others along with them, that they can pay it forward, but I'll just say it out loud. It's much better to welcome folks at the table than to close the door behind you. It's so important that we would lift as we climb. And then the last thing I'll say is, look around and look at representation, in your internships and at different tables that you're sitting in. And it's okay to question, if representation isn't there. I mean, you should not be the only person of color or the only woman or the only person with a disability sitting at the table. And so I think that it's really important to just have the courage to question that if you do happen to have a seat at these tables.
As you're talking and you're saying you're enough, I was looking at the two pictures behind you. She is enough. And then you have another one behind you. She is fearless. So that kind of is your mantra, isn't it?
It is. It is. I have to remind myself every single day. You know, we sit in these virtual conference rooms and on these virtual calls, and there's actually 4 pictures. There's more. There's one that she is valiant and she is strong. And it's smaller print, but there are Bible verses that are attached to those, because I have to take that into the places that I go in, because that's where I find strength. Daily affirmations, I believe, are so very important.
I love that. And I believe in that as well. I'm a big believer in quotes and collecting those, the lift as you climb. That is something that I love. I've used that a lot with my students. So thank you for, that. That's fantastic. And, Erica, what say you about the advice that you would give our diverse students and alumni and how we navigate issues of race in the career? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's such a special time, and I just want to take the time to applaud all of you. Your time at the university looks very different from mine and from LaDavia's, right? This is an interesting time, but stay encouraged, right? Just as you're seeing all of these things, as LaDavia was mentioning, you had Trayvon, certainly George Floyd was not the first, and unfortunately there will be more. However, you're seeing, with the pandemic and this angst, coming off of the lockdown, all of this attention, and it's the year of an election. It's the perfect storm. We're doing things that we never thought we would do before, right? You have companies where maybe they had a flexible policy where they'd allowed 1 day a week to work from home. Now you have corporations, they've been doing this for going on 8 months now, right? So if there's ever a time to do it, we have to do it now to maximize change. And you are in the middle of history. This is a pivotal moment, right? So, we might not notice when we're in the majority, but we'll likely always notice when we're in the minority, right? Just thinking about what can you do to continue to help the world, and thinking about what does it mean to be inclusive? What does it mean to ensure that you show up every day who you are? And it's not a matter of, what I tell leaders, it's not a matter of you teaching others how to assimilate and to fit the in group, right? No, you are now meeting the out group where they are as a leader, right? So when you are interviewing companies, it is your right. It is a two-way street, right? Don't feel like you have to bend and mold yourself to be something. It's super important, that you find a company that aligns with your values, right? That's something that a lot of companies are paying attention to. They are, especially Mercedes, right? Not only are our employees looking to see what we're doing in this moment, but so are our customers, so are our community stakeholders. All of these things matter. So don't underestimate your role and your value in that. And just, stay encouraged, I would say, to remain curious, show genuine interest in learning about other people, other experiences, be bold, think about how you can think about things through a different lens. And then I think what's really important right now in this space is, most importantly, be forgiving, right? To assume positive intent, forgive someone who does not get it right, help them understand your point of view, and lean into those difficult conversations, because they're going to keep on coming. And that's the way that you're able to grow and build relationships. And you would be surprised how many people will oftentimes respect you for asserting your opinion, for having a position, and for having a voice. So just stay encouraged. It's been a difficult year for all of us, for sure.
It certainly has. And having grace in the moment and allowing people to come to you, even if the questions, they may think, well, I didn't state that exactly the way I meant it. It's okay. At least they're coming to have the conversation. They're not hiding. They're not going to take what they've heard and take it as gospel. They're willing to do the hard work of research and asking and questioning. So both of you are tremendous women. I'm just thrilled that I had the opportunity to get to know you in the short time that we've had.
Mm-hmm. People think.
No, please go ahead. Erica? Yeah, please. I think you were going to say something, Erica? No? Okay.
I think I have a bit of delay on my side, so apologies for that. No, just saying that you
yes, we do have a delay. We do have a little bit of a technical glitch, but we're going to come back. I think we're going to turn things over to Seth. Yes, I can. Did you want to finish your thought before I pass it over to Seth? Because we missed your thought. If you would like to recap, and then we can pass it to Seth. I think we still have that delay. Seth, would you like to join us and questions for participants today?
Yes, thank you, Michelle, for doing wonderful work moderating our discussion. So we do have some live questions. We have some from our Black alumna who's also doing the DEI work in her space. So she wants to know, what measurable objectives do you use to determine success, and how difficult is it to get executives or C-suite commitments and getting to those outcomes?
I can kick us off. So we have this saying in Amazon that, good intentions are nice, but mechanisms are better. So we actually mechanize everything that we do for the most part. And we also set very, very clear SMART goals and back into those goals. For example, right now, we're working on what do we want to look like in 2025, being very clear about that. And then we're going to work backwards from 2025. And that's how we're setting our goals. And so it's just really important to use mechanisms and to be very clear and to use data and drive with goals when you can. I've noticed that executives respond, they respond better when you actually have hard data that you're in that helps support the work that you're going after.
I think Erica still has a delay. So I think there might be some weather issues there. So can you go a little bit further? So we know that people of color are not in those spaces, and so how can we engage like white men or white folks are in those power spaces to get them motivated to push forward these D&I initiatives?
And Erica, feel free to type in answers, and I'll help you get your answers through if you want to type them in. But can
you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
I'm back. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I think we've got some hurricane stuff headed our way here in the South. So, it's really important, especially when white men continue to be at the helm of leadership and they influence all the decisions. So it really is getting them to lean into the conversation and understand they are part of this. You just can't hire someone, right? So just kind of look at the diversity lady, she'll fix it. No, right? And really, with diversity and inclusion, when done correctly, it's change management. Change management is at the crux of it, right? So you're looking at yours, right? To think about that. You have a lot of people who want to get into this space, and it's because they are passionate about it. And I think that helps. However, that is not ensure success, right? So a lot of actually now, it's certainly not to downplay it or to say that it's because they want to save money or they view it as a quick fix or an easy route. They're appointing people of color or women into these roles and charging them with the responsibility to fix things when it comes to diversity. Just because the experience is there, being a person who is diverse, that does not equate with expertise, right? So it's having the alignment of experience, expertise, and really it is, I talked about that resilience, and it's being very sure-footed and knowing who you are. Walking through, you've got data, That really helps when you talk about like the business case for diversity. I'm sure you've heard of that as well, right? Pointing to the data. Although data can be manipulated, there are some ways to present it that it's pretty clear cut what needs to happen, right? So you have to learn their language, speak it to them that way, and really, again, just continue to tell them it's not what they always think that they want. It's really telling them what they need and looking at the business impact. And of course, it depends on your industry, looking at the customer base. For example, at Mercedes, I mean, we are in the midst of a pandemic, and when it comes to friends and family, those discounts, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I've used all of mine, given them to my African American friends who are out here building 2021 Mercedes in excess of $90,000. Why wouldn't you maximize that, right? So really taking advantage and looking at it to make business sense. If you have someone come in and they're telling you, looking at P&L sheets and they're looking at margins, they're telling you how to increase your margins, leadership would do what they needed to do to change things. Why would it be any different when it comes to diversity and inclusion? So you really have to translate that over into why it is a business imperative. It's not just the nice, warm and fuzzy stuff. And I made it clear right away. And, people laugh, but I'm so serious. Like, the event planning, it happens, right? But I'm a strategist. I didn't come up in here to plan Taco Tuesday, right? So it's you kind of have to increase that credibility quotient, right? And sometimes it is coming in and reframing the way that they think diversity inclusion is, what they think it is, because a lot of people don't know. So it's a lot of teaching, and you have to have that level of patience. You always have to assess organizational readiness, but at the same time, being very firm to push people. And no one usually raises their hand to volunteer for change. So you have to have those skills to understand the fundamentals of change management and how to impart that. Oh, and if anybody wants a Mercedes, you can let me know. Always looking at more cars.
I think there's a new meeting to Taco Tuesday. I was a fan of that.
All right. Davia, did you want to add to that? What she said?
Yeah, well, I think Erica hit on a lot of it, right? We are subject matter experts, we are professionals, and this work should be treated, as such. And it's really important to make sure that message is heard loud and clear. We don't walk into the law firm telling lawyers how to do their work, and the same goes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So not much to add there. I really think that Erica, she covered it.
So we did get a question on more at the employee level, not the power structure level. How can one that's passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion be a better ally in their prospective company or organization? We can start with Davia.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And allyship is definitely it's the thing to talk about right now. And a lot of folks, they want to know, well, how can I be a better ally? And I'll tell you, my response, especially if it's someone that doesn't come from an underrepresented community or a marginalized community, I'd say do your homework. It's really important to read and to understand the history behind why we face the issues that we face today. And I think that coming to the table with that type of knowledge helps to unblock and unlock some things. So I'd say just first that's really important, and then for those that have the power and have the influence, use it. A lot of folks talk about privilege. So I'm going to talk about power. If you have the power to change things, change things. Look around the room. If you're the only, if you don't see anyone that looks any different than you, then change that. I know for myself, when I have the ability to make hires and to diversify my team, I do that. In this space, it's really important to make sure that we practice what we preach. So I do that very thing myself. So hopefully that's helpful for those who want to be allies. I say first, educate yourself, and secondly, use your power and your influence to bring about change in your space.
Erica?
Yeah, echoing what LaDavia said, right? And so that education piece, that is absolutely key. I think it's, always easy, whether it's, other employees or other people in positions of power, right? Those leadership positions, it's always easy to point, the finger, right? Especially those cisgender, straight white men who hold these positions of power, and tell them how they need to acknowledge their power and their privilege to better understand problems held by women, for LGBTQIA, for people with disabilities, whatever the case may be. However, it really is important to pause and turn those very same questions and conversations on ourselves, and really think about, are we truly viewing allyship as a strategic tool, really, right? To collaborate with each other, to help each other fight these injustices and issues of inequity that we continue to experience. So really turning that inward, to be really introspective. You can't start on the work until you know what your own starting point is. So taking an assessment of your own cultural background, your heritage, the privilege, right, that you have, and all of us have privilege to a degree. So understanding what that is. And I have a lot of people say, what can I do to be an ally? And so I always turn the question back to them: what exactly do you want to be an ally for? There are a lot of ways to show up, and you really don't know how you've made an ally until you really understand the issues that need to be repaired. So a lot of education, and understanding that no one belongs to a monolithic group. So if you are taking efforts to be an ally to the Black community, if you go and speak to someone who was Black, your homework's not done, because guess what? We don't all think the same thing, right? And that's why you see Black/African American. You can have someone who's Black because they are a native of Haiti. Their experiences have been completely different. Growing up, they had the what I deem to be a luxury of seeing people in positions of power who looked like them, right? Versus someone who may have grown up in a rural area of the United States, where their experience is completely different. They identify as African American. So you have there's a lot of education, just to continue to collect these various perspectives and experiences, and align that with your own experience, and figure out how you can jump in and help.
If I can add to that too, I think it's important that I get that question a lot. What can I do? Well, I'll say, well, who do you go out to dinner with? Who are you inviting to your home for an event? Are you just strictly staying in your lane, or are you inviting people in that don't look like you, and having real relationships, and not just reading about it, but inviting people in and getting to know a variety of different people who do not think and act and look like you? I think that's important as well.
Well, David, did you want to add to that?
I really think that we've covered it. I mean, I want to make sure we get as many questions as possible. So I'll let you move on.
No problem. So we'll go ahead. So we had one prospective student who was curious to know of your experiences as a Black woman or African American woman in your spaces in the corporate world. Can you kind of talk about some of the challenges and successes that you've had in that environment? And we'll start with you, LaDavia.
I'll just say, Black women are the least protected group probably in the world, and I find my strength in other Black women, because I think we've just decided collectively that we're going to protect each other, and we're going to promote each other, and we're going to lift up each other, I can't say that it's easy, but it's not just work. It's the same circumstance if I'm in the grocery store or wherever I may be. I get nervous when a police officer rides by me. I spent the last 13 years in DC, and now I'm in Ohio, and I'm back in Ohio, and it's a totally different feeling that I have when I see a police car. So I would be lying if I said that it was any different for me outside of work or inside of work. Very often, people will talk over you, and maybe not even acknowledge your presence, depending on, when you're in a meeting. I find it interesting, but I always find the courage to speak up, and to make sure to make sure to take my place in the conversation. So I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said that it was just easy. just being who we are. But I do believe that Black women really do support each other and lift each other up, and that's what makes all the difference. It's made all the difference in my career, and I try my very best to do the same thing for Black women, whether it's at work or in my personal life.
Erica? She might be still getting the delay. Okay. Michelle, did you want to talk a little bit about that, about, maybe an role in academia or just in general, just, your experiences being a Black woman, some of your experiences?
What LaDavia said is spot on. We are the most underappreciated, unprotected, but I have found great, I think, solidarity with other Black women who are on Miami's campus. I have incredible network of support in CAS and a variety of the different academic divisions, and we pull and thrive together and pull on each other. And that's so important. When I was a student at Miami, I saw a fierce Black woman in Murtis Powell. And Dr. Powell was someone who I emulated. I wanted to be like her. She said exactly what she meant. She was tough, but you knew that she cared, because if she didn't, she would say nothing to you. And she made sure that students were not invisible. So I took that to heart, and I emulated those strengths and tried to come up with my own, way of handling people and dealing with situations, taking some of the Murtis Powell model and adding it to my own personality, if you will. So I get great strength from other Black women and try very hard to pull them in. I think, when they're out, it's easy, particularly in Farmer, because, we are such a big school, that you forget that you have allies outside of the business school. You must seek those allies out and pull them in and make them a part of your community. So I echo exactly what LaDavia said and appreciate her thoughts, but that's what it takes to survive and thrive. At least in my world, in academia, which is just as politically charged as a corporation. I've yet to have worked in a space that is more political than higher education.
Yeah.
So it might be a little feedback from Erica. We'll start with Michelle. The last question. So Wells Fargo CEO made a remark that there was a lot of controversy about there's a lack of talent from Black folks to assume roles in their company. And with your role in the business school and what you've seen over the years, how would you take from that comment and go from there?
I think that is just that comment is one that is just them skirting the issue. I'll say that politely in a political way. I think that is not representative at all. In fact, it's a lazy way of saying that you just can't find people because you're not working hard enough to do the hard work, the rolling up your sleeves. There's plenty of talent at Miami and other institutions. You have failed to roll up your sleeve and really get out there and find the talent, because it exists. People make excuses all the time for why they can't have this and why we can't have that. I've yet to find that if you really want something, it can be done. It can happen. People just don't want it to happen. And that is a problem. So for me, I try to instill in my students that you must be very strong and have a very strong inner core and know who you are and the legacy that you have and the people that have that have come before you to build what you have right now, and to not squander that. So I would avoid working at places that have that rhetoric. I would definitely find places that are open to finding diverse talent, because it is definitely there. And I would say to students, wherever you go, be fearless. You do not want to apologize for your talent, who you are, what you look like. There is no apology. You deserve to have a seat at the table. You have earned your seat at the table, and no one should be taking that away from you and questioning you. I have been in those roles before, in the position where people, I have to do double duty. I know Erica, LaDavia, we have to do extra to get where we're at right now. But that's okay, because we can do it. We can do extra, because no one's going to stop us. Because when we work collectively, we will create change, and we will make things happen.
Davia, you want to chime in, and then we'll finish from there?
Yeah, so I'll just, it's just not true. Let's just state the fact. If you want to have more executives of color or women, then if you really believe that you can't find them, right, because you're not doing the work to do it, how about upscale? How about take people that are already in your company and put them in a position and develop them so that they can then be leaders in your company? There's multiple different ways that you can get at this so-called challenge, this so-called problem. But let's just debunk that myth right now. There is not a pipeline problem. The only problem is a problem of will. Do you want to have a more diverse workforce? Do you want to give women a seat at the table? Do you want people from the LGBTQ plus community to feel welcome at your company and feel as though they can ascend? That is the question. That is the question. So I'll just tell you now, Amazon, we've made a $700 million commitment to upskilling. That means taking someone who comes in with certain skill and making sure that they can then be that tech leader at some point in their career, and investing in their development. That is important, and that is key. And Michelle is right. For students who are listening, do your homework about these companies. And when you're interviewing, ask these really difficult questions. Ask about representation at the top and in management, and ask for those numbers. And if they can't give you the numbers, then there's something wrong. If they won't give you those numbers, then there's something wrong. And then you can make the decision if that's where you want to use your time and your talent. And I would say you keep on looking until you find a company or an organization that matches your principles, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It'll make the world a better place.
So we apologize, Erica's end. So she's having some technical issues there due to the weather that's coming through there in the Atlanta area. So we thank all of our esteemed alumni here for participating today. And thank you again, Michelle, for moderating this wonderful discussion. We hope the audience enjoyed what was shared today. So you can feel free to watch this program again, the replay, or you can tune in to other of our many webinars that we've had in the past and are upcoming by going to the link that's provided there below. And so thank you again for everybody for watching, and love and honor. Take care.
Love and honor, Miami. Bye.
Bye.